Good morning and welcome to the first of our four-part Maryland legislative series. While we can't be together in person, we are thrilled that more than 100 people have joined us online this morning. Before we begin, I'd like to let you know that this program is being recorded. My name is Bobby Shulman, and it is my pleasure to serve along with my friend and colleague Todd Rosenberg as co-chair of the JCRC of Greater Washington's Maryland Commission. Excuse me. The JCRC serves as the public affairs and community relations arm of the suburban Maryland, Northern Virginia, and DC organized Jewish community. Greater DC is home to over 300,000 Jewish people in the third largest Jewish community in the country. The JCRC represents more than 100 organizations, synagogues, and the Jewish Federation in advocating for the needs, priorities, and values of the Jewish community and the well-being of everyone in the Greater Washington region. Each year at the grassroots level, our advocacy work includes convening you, our community, for education and discussion, as well as for in-person meetings with legislators at the federal, state, and local levels. This year, while we can't hold our annual legislative breakfast in person, we are bringing to you our elected officials and legislative priorities through this morning series. We are pleased to have with us Senators Ben Cardin and Chris Van Hollen. They will share with us their priorities for the upcoming year and will also address the JCRC's legislative priorities. Following the senators' remarks, JCRC Executive Director Ron Halber will moderate a discussion with the senators. Please put your questions in the Q&A box and Ron will try to get as many as time permits. And now Janice Rosenblatt, JCRC's Maryland Government and Community Relations Associate, will present our federal legislative priorities for 2021. The priorities can be found in the chat and on the JCR website.
Thank you, Bobby, and good morning, everyone. At this difficult time, the needs of our country, and particularly the Jewish community, are of critical importance. As we present the following synopsis of our federal legislative priorities, we, as the Jewish community, commit fully to advocating and working on their behalf. Number one, we remain deeply concerned about the effect of COVID-19, its effect on the country, its people, and institutions. We ask Congress to take action and pass the HEROES Act, H.R. 6800, which has been held up in the Senate since May. These funds will be available to state, local, territorial, and tribal governments to help meet the health, economic, safety, and educational needs resulting from the pandemic. Second, we ask that Congress provide a safety net for our economically most vulnerable populations by increasing SNAP minimum monthly benefits from $16 to $30 for eligible families, extending the housing moratorium, increasing the Holocaust Survivors Assistance Program from $5 million to $10 million for the fiscal 22 budget, reforming and expanding eligibility for income tax credit, and supporting philanthropy through the use of donor-advised funds. We are deeply concerned about Israel and the relationship between the United States and Israel. We request that Congress continue support for Israel by appropriating $3.3 billion in annual security assistance and an additional $500 million for a cooperative missile defense plan. We ask them to co-sponsor a bilateral solution to prevent Iran from attaining and moving forward on nuclear weapons, Senate Resolution 509. We ask them to co-sponsor a bipartisan resolution to support recent peace agreements and oppose anti-Israeli discrimination by international organizations intended to weaken, isolate, and delegitimize Israel. Number four, anti-Semitism is at its highest level in decades, with American Jews and their institutions being targets of a majority of the religious-based hate crimes in the United States. Incidents of anti-Semitism have increased 12% in the United States and 18% worldwide since 2019. We request that Congress combat anti-Semitism and support Holocaust education by adopting the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism and increasing funding for the Never Again Education Act by $10 million in the FY22 budget. Jewish institutions are most often target of domestic terrorism. We ask Congress to support security enhancements for the nonprofit Jewish institutions by funding the Nonprofit Security Grant Program at no less than $360 million a year, beginning in the FY22 budget, to help prepare and train nonprofits deemed at risk for domestic violence. We sincerely thank Senator Cardin and Senator Van Hollen for providing critical support for and championing the priorities of the Jewish community in the past. We know they will continue to work to encourage Congress to pass and fund these important legislative issues. Thank you.
It is with great pleasure that I welcome Senator Ben Cardin. First elected to the Senate in 2006, Senator Cardin has been a champion for the priority issues of the Jewish community, including civil and human rights, healthcare, security, the environment, and the state of Israel. Senator Cardin works across party lines to ensure that good governance, transparency, and respect for human rights are integrated into American foreign policy. He is a strong supporter of the Holocaust Survivor Assistance Program and of the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. He is a deeply committed friend of the Jewish community. Please help me welcome Senator Cardin.
Well, Bobby, first of all, thank you for a very generous introduction, but more importantly, thank you for what you do for the Jewish community and our general community. We appreciate it very, very much. I know Chris and I very much miss being there in person. We love the schmoozing, and we also love the breakfast that you served. So we got to return to the normal way of doing things. I had him impose upon Myrna to make breakfast for me this morning. So anyway, thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be here with my good friend, Chris Van Hollen. The two of us are working very much together during these very challenging times, and I'll talk about some of the specific things that we're doing in order to help. Janice, let me just start off by saying we agree. Your agenda is the agenda we think is extremely important for the Jewish community and for our general community, and we very much support the agenda that has been laid out. I want to also acknowledge how proud I am of the Jewish community and the organizations that provide support to our community. You have really been tested during COVID-19. Your challenges have been much greater. Your resources have been stretched, and you have answered the call. So thank you very much for everything you have done. You make us very proud of the role that you have played in helping us deal with the crisis of our health crisis. COVID-19 is still #1 agenda issue for us. You mentioned the CARES Act that was passed in mid-March. It was a great action, bipartisan action by the Congress to respond to what we thought the crisis needed. That was in mid-March, when many of us thought that by the summertime, the pandemic would be under control. Obviously, that was not the case. As we see, the numbers today are record numbers. We needed a second round of relief. A second round of relief needed to be passed. And the House did the responsible thing by passing that in mid-May. And again, they reiterated that this early fall when they passed the HEROES 2.0 Act. We desperately need that act enacted. No question about it. It should have been enacted months ago, and it deals with a lot of the issues that you've talked about. We are now in December, in the last few days of a lame duck session. Yesterday, we had some good news. We had a bipartisan group of senators and congressmen that have put forward a temporary gap to get us into the Biden administration. And I really want to underscore that. I want the HEROES Act 2.0 to pass. I'm very much in support of that bill. We're not going to be able to get that done in the next few days. This bipartisan agreement is our best chance to get legislation enacted now that will carry us over until President Biden can present to Congress what we need in order to complete the job. So what the bipartisan agreement on COVID-19 would do, it provides help for state and local government. It provides help for our healthcare workers. It provides help for our local school systems, including higher education. It provides the unemployment insurance needs through April. It provides help for small businesses, transportation. We just saw the report on Metro on the desperate need that we have in order to maintain our transit systems. It provides a stopgap help so that they can continue service until the spring. Provides help for housing, particularly those who are desperate in being able to maintain their affordable housing. It provides help for opioid relief. It provides help. It's not enough, but it gets us through to the next administration. We are now focused on trying to get Leader McConnell to bring up a reasonable bill on the floor, give us a chance to vote on it. We had the votes. Now with the Republicans and Democrats working together, we need to get that done. That's our number one priority. As you pointed out, Janice, there's been a sharp rise of anti-Semitism around the United States and around the world. You quoted the numbers. Let me just tell you, the FBI has indicated that hate crimes are the highest in more than a decade, and the Jewish community is the number one target for faith-based hate crimes. I am the special representative on anti-Semitism, racism, and intolerance in the OSCE, which is the European, Central Asia, North America region. And we've documented the rise of anti-Semitism. Just this past week, we saw what happened in Hungary, where it was a direct anti-Semitic attack by the Orban government. We really do need to respond and recognize that we have to have no room for hate. Allowing any group to be marginalized challenges all of us. So I think you will find with the Biden administration that they're going to deal with systemic discrimination in our society as one of their top priorities, whether it's policing, whether it's education, whether it's housing, whether it's healthcare. We have to work together to eliminate the systemic problems that we have in our system and make it clear there is no room for hate. On the appropriation side, I want to acknowledge and thank Senator Van Hollen for his extraordinary work on a lot of key issues, on recognizing that we have to increase the help for nonprofit security grant program. We both support increasing that from the 90 million to the 360 million that you mentioned. That's an important priority that we have going into the next budget cycle. Never Again Education Act, I was proud to co-sponsor that, enacted into law. We need now to fund that. I am a member of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum Board. That act works with the museum to provide the education, Holocaust education, which is critical to understanding in our community. And then let me conclude on the U.S.-Israel relations. When you have, under President Biden, you're going to have a great friend that recognizes the importance of the U.S.-Israel relations. I'm very confident that we're going to see U.S. diplomacy really expand greatly, which is going to be good for Israel, because you already mentioned discrimination against Israel globally. Israel needs the United States actively engaged in global diplomacy in order to remove the type of discriminations we see globally against the state of Israel. So I'm optimistic we're going to see a surge in diplomacy under the Biden administration. Senator Van Hollen has been one of the champions on the Appropriations Committee to make sure we fully fund the Memorandum of Understanding, plus the missile defense systems. I'm very confident that those funds will be made available this year and in the future years. And I thank Senator Van Hollen for his extraordinary leadership on that issue. Two-state solution, we know that's the only way for peace. We've got to really double down and making sure that we all support efforts to get the Palestinians and Israelis together to negotiate a peace. And lastly, let me say in regards to Israel, it's critically important for the future of the U.S.-Israel relations that we maintain the bipartisan, bicameral, executive, legislative support for that. And I can tell you, I will be doing everything I possibly can to make sure Israel is not made a wedge issue in American politics. Again, we thank you and we look forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Senator Cardin. It's my great pleasure to welcome Senator Chris Van Hollen this morning. First elected to the U.S. Senate in 2016, Senator Van Hollen is committed to ensuring that our country lives up to its full promise of equal rights, equal justice, and equal opportunity. Senator Van Hollen is a great friend and strong advocate for our Jewish community, especially in his role as the Appropriations Committee in support of the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, which provides support to nonprofit organizations at high risk of terrorist attacks, including Jewish schools like the one my daughters attended, and synagogues. He has introduced legislation toward ending anti-Semitism and all other forms of discrimination through the No Hate Act, and is a co-sponsor of the Never Again Education Act. Please welcome Senator Chris Van Hollen.
Well, thank you, Todd, and thank you and Bobby for your leadership, and to the JCRC for more than 80 years of service to the Jewish community in the greater Washington area, and also reaching out to the greater community and strengthening the unity within the communities throughout our area. To Ron Halber, thank you for your longtime leadership. Janice, thank you for going over those key legislative priorities. And like my good friend Ben Cardin, I also endorse that agenda. And I just want to take a moment here to thank Senator Cardin for all his leadership as the head of the Maryland congressional delegation, what he does for our country and what he does around the world for human rights and fighting anti-Semitism. So Ben, thank you for all your leadership. And Senator Cardin covered a lot of the key issues, but let me just highlight some as well, starting with the absolute necessity of passing another pandemic relief bill before Congress adjourns. It would be unconscionable, in my view, for the Senate to go home and adjourn before the end of this month without passing emergency relief. And we're all heartened by the bipartisan proposal that was put together. As Senator Cardin said, this is a stopgap measure. It's a 4-month measure to really as a bridge into the Biden-Harris administration. I really hope that can become the template for moving forward. Unfortunately, yesterday, just a few hours after it was announced, you had Senator Mitch McConnell really throwing cold water on it. I hope members of his caucus, including those who have been part of this agreement and proposal, will really pressure him to come to the table. As Senator Cardin said, it doesn't include everything that we want, and it doesn't include everything that Senator McConnell wants, but it is an important step to addressing the desperate needs around the country. So we really have to move forward on that. And I want to thank the JCRC for all the push you've made for the HEROES Act, both 1 and 2. That is the gold standard. That is what we would like to do. And when we have a new administration, we hope to add to some of the pieces that are in the HEROES Act. Let me just touch on and second the things that Senator Cardin said regarding some of the other key priorities put forward by the JCRC, starting with the need to combat the awful rise in hate crimes around the country and anti-Semitism around the world. The FBI statistics are very alarming. They reflect these deep divisions in the country, and worse, that the political divisions are in some cases translating into these hate crimes. We saw the highest number of deaths in hate crime related incidents in the country ever. And we've seen a 12 to 14% increase in crimes based on anti-Semitism and incidents based on anti-Semitism. And so we've got to confront this as a country on an urgent basis. And that means taking the steps and measures the JCRC takes and the steps we take here in Maryland, Senator Cardin, myself, always coming together to stand up against any type of hate when it raises its ugly head. And legislatively, there is the No Hate Act, which provides additional federal resources for hotlines, for the reporting of hate crimes, more funds to incentivize local law enforcement to collect this data, which is so important. And it also provides a federal right of action, private right of action with respect to hate crimes. So we're going to continue to push that forward. The other legislative measures that Senator Cardin mentioned, the Never Again Education Act, I also support more robust funding for that as part of our effort to make sure we never forget the horror, excuse me, the horrors of the Holocaust. And also Senator Cardin's effort to increase the funds for the Holocaust Survivor Assistance Program. Finally, and it was mentioned, our efforts with respect to the Homeland Security nonprofit security grants. These are so essential to protecting targets of anti-Semitism, of racism, of other anti-religious bigotry. And we are working together, Senator Cardin, myself, along with Senator Schumer, to try to significantly increase funding for that measure, as you said, to the $360 million level. So we're going to keep pushing for that. And let me also close on focusing on the essential support that we must continue to provide to Israel as a partner, as a friend, as a key ally in a very dangerous part of the world. And as Senator Cardin said, I will continue to fight for every penny of the security assistance money, the $38 billion over 10 years, that includes very important support for the United States. I will also continue to push for a two-state solution because I do believe that that is the only way to secure a democratic Jewish state and also provide for the legitimate aspirations of the Palestinian people for a homeland and state of their own. And I do believe the incoming Biden administration will return to a focus on what has been a bipartisan consensus for a very long time, until recently, that our focus should be on making sure that our policies support a two-state solution. And I also am a co-sponsor, along with Senator Cardin, of the resolution welcoming the recent agreements between Israel and the UAE and others. I thought those were a very important step forward. It is important to recognize that as part of that agreement, there was at least a suspension, we don't know for how long, of the proposed annexation by Israel of parts of the West Bank. I thought that was an important feature of this agreement, and I'm confident that the incoming Biden administration will continue to push for, again, a non-annexation policy as part of a push to a two-state solution. And finally, as Senator Cardin said, I do think that the engagement of the incoming administration globally on peace in the Middle East is very much in the long-term interests of Israel and the United States. And I'm looking forward to working with Senator Cardin and the incoming administration to accomplish those goals so the state of Israel can continue to thrive and be successful in a very dangerous part of the world. So thank all of you for, again, gathering. As Ben said, we wish we could be there in person. This pandemic is, I think, wearing on all of us, of course, most of all on the people who have been struck by the virus, and also those who are so badly hurt by the economic fallout. We've really got to focus on making sure that we have an important safety net for them as we recover and pull out of this pandemic. So thank you all very much.
Senator Cardin, Senator Van Hollen, thank you, both of you, first of all, for waking up this early to be with us. Number two, for your extraordinary commitment to public service. I mean, when we it's clearly heartfelt when you're talking about all the efforts you're trying to do to make people's lives easier during this pandemic. And I'm sure that a lot of us don't, a lot of us realize that the weight on you as public officials is now even more than ever before. So we know that the days are long and the sleep is short, but thank you very much, both of us, from on behalf of the Jewish community, for everything you're doing to try to restore some calmness and some normalcy and some security to the to our American people at this time. So thank you. I want to, and thank you for being, so I want to take the balance of our time to ask a couple questions, domestic and international. The first question is about Iran. We know that the Biden administration wants to re-enter the JCPOA agreement. President-elect Biden has said that during his campaign, and we certainly expect him to follow through. But what is the best way to deal with the following issues? The UN embargo, arms embargo, is ending. There are flaws in the agreement. We know that because it was a very hotly contested battle. So it's the UN arms embargo agreement is ending. I'm trying to give you a chance to write some notes. Flaws in the agreement, and Iran, which continues to be the world's lead sponsor of terrorism. How do we deal with this, and how do we ensure that there is greater consultation and coordination with Israel to ensure their security concerns are taken into account? So why don't we start with Ben, and then we Senator Cardin, and sorry, Ben.
That's all right, Ron. Well, first, let me. I just wanted to echo what Senator Van Hollen said. Congratulations on the work that you have done. You have developed the political strategy to advance the interests of the Jewish community, and you do that with such professionalism and commitment. And I just really want to. The JCRC is a premier organization in this country, so great work. Iran is a dangerous country. We know that. I serve on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. We spend a lot of time with Iran. Let me just take you back to the beginning of the Trump administration, where Iran, in regards to its nuclear obligations, was in full compliance. The United States was at the table watching what Iran was doing, part of the inspection information being made available, and part of the team to make sure that Iran behaved. At that time, we had the support of our closest allies, Europe, UK, France, and Germany, to deal with Iran's non-nuclear violations and to extend the embargo, the UN embargo. What happened next was that President Trump, against I think the advice of most foreign policy experts, unilaterally withdrew the United States from the nuclear agreement, even though Iran was in full compliance, which isolated America rather than Iran. At that time, we lost Europe. I know that. I talked to our European counterparts, and I know how they felt. They were willing to work with the United States to impose sanctions against Iran for non-nuclear violations, including support of terrorism and human rights violations. But once the United States pulled out of the agreement, they no longer were interested in doing that. I also know we had their support for extending the arms embargo. But once the United States pulled out of the Iran agreement, the Europeans felt that the only way they could keep Iran in check was to oppose the US efforts in regards to the arms embargo. So with President Biden, he's going to engage the international community and make sure there's unity among the Western powers going into these negotiations, and then work very aggressively to see whether we can't get China and Russia to join us. We can, because China and Russia don't want to see a rogue Iran out there. So this is a winnable issue. And the way that the Trump administration has handled it has made us less safe. We're in worse shape today than we were 4 years ago with Iran. So I have confidence that the experience of Joe Biden, that we will be able to once again isolate Iran, get the international community to work with us to not only comply with their nuclear obligations, but also to deal with their non-nuclear violations.
So I endorse everything that Senator Cardin said. Look, the idea behind the JCPOA was very straightforward. It is that it is unacceptable for the security of the United States and Israel and others for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. And there are two ways to stop that. One, you get a negotiated agreement that's verifiable, or two, you go to war. And I think the decision was we're all better off if we are able to negotiate an agreement, which is what the JCPOA was. It is not perfect, but it is based on the idea that a nuclear armed Iran or a nuclear capable Iran is much more dangerous than a non-nuclear armed Iran. And as Senator Cardin said, Iran was complying fully with the limitations on its nuclear program. And as a result of the United States essentially tearing up the agreement, if you look at Iran today, they're no longer complying once we withdrew, and they have more nuclear enriched material today than they did before. You have the hardliners in Iran on the ascendancy, and I'm not suggesting that there are any real Democrats in Iran, but there are power struggles, and there are folks who are more hardline and those who are less hardline, and the hardliners have the upper hand. And as Senator Cardin said, instead of isolating Iran, we isolated the United States. So I support the efforts of the incoming administration to bring Iran back into compliance. I think if, as we do that, working with our allies, we can also address these other issues of the arms embargo. And there may also be opportunities to, for example, extend some of the timelines within the JCPOA. But I think today, if you just objectively look at the situation on the ground, Iran has not, changed its spots in any way, and yet it now has more nuclear material than it did 4 years ago. So I'm hopeful we can get back on track. It is going to be, the Biden administration will have to determine the best way to return to the limit, to make sure Iran returns to compliance, and a strategy for working with our allies to deal with the other issues that you just asked about.
Thank you, Senator. The next question, I'm combining them so we can get as many as we can in during our few moments we have. Can you please comment on climate change and funding of the Green Climate Fund? We'll start with Senator Van Hollen this time. So climate change, the general issue, and Green Climate Fund.
Well, I mean, climate change is here. It's real. We're already seeing the devastating impacts on communities across our country and around the world. And as Joe Biden, as President-elect Biden has said, we have to address climate change. But as he's pointed out, there are also great opportunities in terms of jobs and good paying jobs for us to move in the direction of an economy that's based more on clean energy and applies more energy efficiency. And so he will begin day one to reverse some of the damage that's been done by the Trump administration, begin, for example, to reimpose the methane emissions rules, work on the clean power plant regulations under EPA authority, and maybe build on that. The whole issue of auto emissions, we've already seen General Motors, abandoned, the push by the Trump administration to essentially get rid of the California car standards, which Maryland adheres to. And then, of course, internationally, on day one, you're going to see the United States rejoin the Paris Climate Accords. Recognizing that climate change is not something that we can deal with on our own. And in fact, it's absolutely essential that we do this and take on a leadership role again with the global community. And let me just say, with respect to the opportunities at hand, China is moving ahead very rapidly in developing, clean energy technologies, which are going to be a huge international market in the years ahead, and we have lost time over the last 4 years in not providing incentives here in the United States for moving forward. So with respect to the Green Climate Fund, we need to make investments. I mean, we need to invest in these areas. And in my view, we also need to put a price on carbon. And I've proposed for years an idea of cap and dividend, where you cap emissions at the levels the scientists say is necessary to prevent, catastrophic climate change, and return those funds to every American in the form of a dividend. So a lot of work to do here, and I'm pleased that the Biden-Harris administration is making that a priority. And of course, the appointment of Senator Kennedy as the climate czar is an indication that this will be a priority.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cardin, would you like to comment on climate change and the Green Climate Fund?
Yeah, and I won't be, I'll be very brief because I agree with what Senator Van Hollen has said. Let me just observe, there is more bipartisan support in Congress than you might think in regards to dealing with climate. If you take a look at the bill, Senator Van Hollen and I both serve on the Environment and Public Works Committee. If you take a look at the transportation bill that we passed unanimously in our committee, it has a climate section in there. It deals with the realities of adapting to climate change. And it also has a strong component in electric vehicles and dealing with an infrastructure that's friendlier towards the environment. So the first step that President Biden's going to take is to rejoin the Paris climate agreements. I headed 10 senators who were in Paris in 2015 when we passed when we joined the Paris agreements. We're now the only country in the world that's not part of it. So the United States will again be the leader in regards to the global movement to deal with climate change. Our absence has given China the opportunity to have much more influence globally. And when we look at the greatest threats against America, we've talked about Iran, but recognize China presents a real security threat to our economy because they want to control the rules of commerce based upon a controlled government economy rather than an open market economy. And that's one of the great challenges we have going forward. So the climate issue presents an opportunity for us to deal with the threat to our planet, but also to deal with US influence globally in regards to our values. So I really do think you'll see a much greater engagement. The Green Fund is critically important to third world nations that we're asking to make additional sacrifices today that could affect their economic growth, where we give them other alternatives. It's an international responsibility the US needs to be a leader on, and we need to make sure that's funded.
Thank you, Senator Cardin. On a domestic front, we are very concerned in the Jewish community about the social safety net and the social fabric being maintained for the Jewish community and beyond, not just during COVID, but when there isn't COVID. We're trying to remember a time right now that there wasn't COVID, but it seems hard to be able to grasp right now. A couple things. We're concerned about SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Program, that money be increased, that it's not adequate to feed families, and we're concerned about the housing eviction moratorium and about expanding the earned income tax credit. Now, I think Montgomery County may have been one of the first local jurisdiction in the United States, if I remember, to implement an earned income tax credit back maybe 15 years ago under Doug Duncan. Can you just maybe briefly comment on SNAP, housing evictions, and the earned income tax credit? And that probably will be our last question.
Well, I assume we're rotating, so let me just go quickly if I might on
Sure.
this. These are issues that we had challenges pre-COVID-19, but COVID-19 has even made these issues much more in focus. Hunger it's first, the food banks are doing an incredible job. Our safety net in the private sector has been incredible, but Americans are hungry today. We have to recognize that. The SNAP program is critically important to be funded. We've provided money in the CARES Act. We have money in the HEROES Act. We need another influx of additional resources into SNAP, and we're working hard to make sure that's included in the priorities, because that's a very important issue. We have money in the HEROES Act and in the bipartisan to deal with housing. we might have moratoriums on evictions, but how are renters going to be able to pay the back rent? We got to be realistic about what's happened during COVID-19 and make sure that we have a social safety net for affordable housing in this country. I would add also opioid and mental health issues. One of the major casualties of COVID-19 in health has been in the mental health areas, and we need to invest more resources into mental health and addiction issues as we go forward. And then lastly, in the tax code, we are looking for ways that we can deal with working families, and it is our top priority in the Democratic caucus to increase the support we give for working families and children. And I expect that will be part of any tax bill that comes out under a Biden administration.
Thank you, Senator Cardin. Senator Van Hollen, would you like to comment on SNAP, housing, eviction, and the earned income tax credit?
Yes, and these are top priorities for us in the COVID relief package. As we've seen both in our community, across our state and across our country, long lines of people, looking for food help because of their food insecurity. We've seen food insecurity rise to record levels in terms of keeping data on this. So we've got to increase the SNAP funding as well as extending the current programs for the free and reduced lunch programs being available at schools and allowing family members to participate. I also want to salute food banks, JCRC, the Jewish community agencies, as well as other faith-based organizations throughout our community and state for stepping up, and country. Let me just say, as has been indicated, as we all know, we're going to see a tsunami of evictions if we don't address this. And the eviction moratorium, while imperfect and leaky, has still been essential. But of course, that simply delays the problem because that means people are going to have these balloon payments that are due. And so that's why it's essential that we do two things. Number one, we've got to provide expanded UI, which expires at the end of this month, with the additional $300 that's what's proposed in the bipartisan proposal. And that will, of course, help unemployed people make payments on cars or whatever. But in addition to that, there is this rental assistance fund in the HEROES Act and a stopgap fund in the bipartisan agreement. And so those are essential safety nets. And I should say, in addition to the tenants who are at risk of eviction, there are lots of landlords that do not have deep pockets, that have their own bills to pay. And so it's important that we ensure that those payments be made. Finally, on EITC, I'm glad you mentioned this. As Senator Cardin said, this is really part of our longer term strategy to make work pay in America, and to deal with the fact that you can, still shockingly work full time in America, 40 hours a week, and still be below the federal poverty line for a family of four. So we need to address that in many ways, including, in my view, a significant increase in the EITC.
Right. Senator Cardin, Senator Van Hollen, thank you so much for the wonderful, warm relationship that you both have with the Jewish community. Thank you for always being so responsive. And I was thinking about how to say thank you, but I think I'll just quote our friend Jocelyn Krifsher, one of my friends and activists, who said in the chat box, "Thank you for our senators for representing us magnificently, and we're blessed to have both of you." And I think that sums it up perfectly well. Now let me turn it over to Todd Rosenberg to conclude the program.
Ron, if I could just briefly, I also want to acknowledge the work of Senator Cardin's and my teams. And Joan Kleiman is, I know, here with us today, and I want to thank her. She's been our longtime first congressional director and state director. And on all these issues you just mentioned in terms of providing relief, Senator Cardin and I on a daily basis are dealing with constituents calling our offices. And Joan Kleiman has been, our point person on that.
Well, I can promise you, we all have Joan Kleiman and Ken Reichert on speed dial.
And Ken Reichert as well.
So I'll turn it. Thank you. And Joan has been a great friend for over 2 decades. And Ken's been a great friend for over 2 decades. Thank you. You both have actually marvelous staff that is incredibly responsive. Thank you. Let me turn it over to Todd.
So let me add my thanks to Senator Cardin and Senator Van Hollen for sharing your time and your expertise with us, and for your deep and long-lasting commitment to our Jewish community and its priorities. We look forward to many more years of friendship and partnership. We invite you all to join us Wednesday, December 16th at 8:30 a.m. for the second part of this 4-part series. We will be joined by the Honorable Anthony Brown, the Honorable Jamie Raskin, the Honorable John Sarbanes, and the Honorable David Trone. The legislative series is free and open to the public. It is, however, not possible for the JCRC to provide this level of programming or to do the advocacy work that we do without ongoing support. Sponsorship opportunities for this series are available for $180. Thank you to Marilyn Wynn, Richard Goldstein, Jennifer Mizrahi, my colleague Bobby Schulman for their sponsorship. If you would like to join them in sponsoring the remaining webinars and in our legislative series, you can make a gift on our website at jcouncil.org. Thank you for sharing this morning with us. We look forward to seeing you on the 16th.
Stay well, everybody.
Thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody, for joining us.